All right, welcome everybody around the world. Welcome to all my subscribers. So, this video, I am saying something that I've said many times before, but as we get closer and closer to the potential time period, it just gets more and more urgent and important. So, I would feel absolutely terrible if I am correct and the end does arrive and so few people have been warned. I've done all that I can for 7 years. I'm dirt poor. I've utilized YouTube for 7 years now, warning people since 2016 about 2023, 2024 being the end, okay, based on the biblical prophecies. And over those 7 years, I made more and more discoveries. And 1 year ago, roughly, I got my book published where I compiled, it's the compilation of 7 pillars of scriptural proofs, the 7 different prophecies in the Bible, okay, where God has told us each one of the 7 is a separate prophecy with its own number, okay, in terms of how long this time period is that God is talking about, okay? So all 7 are about a specific numbered length of time, okay, and specified length of time. And this is incredible evidence. But more importantly, I'm going to share some of it tonight because it has to be heard. I'm trying to raise awareness. Not enough people are listening because of the way that the algorithms work and searches and all of that. Unless you start off with millions of followers, your videos won't even show up in YouTube searches. So it's very hard. Even though I've been on YouTube for 7 years, I've been able to reach about 250,000 people, which is fairly good. But nonetheless, there's billions of people in the world, and it should be able to reach a lot larger audience. More people need to be ready because right now, especially on YouTube being like the number one sharing platform in the world, the vast majority of information out there about when the end days comes, whether 2023, now 2024, the vast majority of that evidence is, I'm sorry, but it's bogus. It's always based upon stuff that's not really even scriptural whatsoever. The only true scriptural approach, and I'll explain it in this video so people can get a firm understanding of why this is so significant. And it's not just me fluffing things up. Like, this is legit. This is from the Bible. And I want to explain it in a way, okay, in this video here, where people can firmly understand and grasp just how important and real this is and biblical. Okay, this is nothing that I've invented. It's nothing that I've fluffed up. Okay, so out of the 7 pillars of scriptural proof, as I call it in the book, out of the 7 different prophecies, 5 of them are ones that I worked on myself, discovered myself. But the other ones I'm going to focus on tonight are the other 2. Although I discovered them myself, a few others in the world had discovered it before me. Okay, so I'm not going to claim like these are my discoveries, and it doesn't matter who discovered it, right? But this is from the prophecy of Daniel. Okay, so out of the 7 in my book, 2 of the 7 are this prophecy here from Daniel, which is in chapter 12. Okay, there's one period of time of 1290 years, and then there's another period of 1260 years. Okay, so one of them I designate as the 5th pillar, one is the 6th pillar. Okay, explain all that in the book. But nonetheless, we have 2 separate numbered periods of time in prophecy from God that I'm going to cover here in this video that pertain to the prophecy of Daniel. Now, very few people in the world have ever stumbled upon this wisdom. Okay, few people have studied it and discovered it. You could count it on one hand, myself included. Very few people. There's very few books or websites that talk about the prophecy of Daniel and the resultant end days time period, which would be 2023, 2024. Very few people, less than 5, I think, in the world. So nonetheless, very few people, because of that, in the world, out of the billions of people, have been exposed to that wisdom and knowledge. And I think if anybody in a right mind, if they heard the evidence, they would become a full believer because it's undeniable. Okay, like the title of my video here says, you cannot in your right mind deny it. It is self-evident. Okay, so I'll give a quick rundown, and this is not covering all the 7 pillars of evidence. This is just covering 2 of them. Okay, but this is how grand, how spectacular the evidence is. Okay, now in the book of Daniel, which was written between 100 and something and 500 and something BC. And whether Daniel himself wrote it or a later person wrote it, in either case, as I've always wisely argued, doesn't matter who wrote it or when it was written between 100 and 500 something BC, because whoever wrote it still ended up writing bona fide prophecy, okay? Which would lend credence to it more likely being the biblical prophet. But nonetheless, doesn't matter who wrote it, because whoever did write it wrote down what would come to pass thousands of years later to the T, like right on the year, right? Maths were perfect. Okay, so that's the important part. So this is bona fide prophecy. And it doesn't matter if people want to argue who wrote it, when it was written, that's irrelevant. It's bona fide prophecy, whether you like it or not. It's bona fide prophecy. It all came true. It's undeniable. Okay, and we're told, and this is just keeping this video here focused on this one little narrow band of topic here. All the other evidence I can provide, the supporting that I cover in the book here from the other 7 pillars, consider that as well in the back of your mind. But today, focusing on this. In the prophecy of Daniel, in chapter 12, he says that there would be 1,290 day years. So 1,290 years, okay, from when the continual sacrifice is taken away until a certain event occurs. Let's first look at when was the continual sacrifice taken away according to the Bible, who did it according to the Bible, and who did it according to history. Well, history actually agrees with the Bible on this. It was Nebuchadnezzar with the kingdom of Neo-Babylon, as historians call it now. Okay, and he came in 602 BC. It is documented in the Bible, in the years documented by historians, is 602 BC. This is when the temple was ransacked, the temple implements are taken away, and the continual sacrifice was stopped. Okay, 602 BC, 1,290 years after 602 BC would take you to 688 AD. Okay, now what occurred in 688 AD? Most people don't know, but you need to know. In 688 AD, the Empire of Islam, which had just earlier conquered Israel, okay, they built the Dome of the Rock on the Temple Mount. So they removed the remnants of what was there and then built the Dome of the Rock to a new god, a new religion upon the Temple Mount. That was in 688 AD. And that's the official date, even according to Islamic records. Okay? It was started in 688 and it was finished in 691. Okay? But 688 is the official date. And it's exactly 1,290 years from when the continual sacrifice was taken away. So if you look at Daniel's prophecy, God says that from when the continual sacrifice is taken away until when the abomination is standing, there are 1,290 years. And then what we're told in Daniel's prophecy is that from that point, there's a measure of 1,260 years. Okay, now 1,260 years, which is 3.5 times, 1,260 years from 688 AD takes you to 1948 AD. Okay, now 1948 was the rebirth of Israel, which, by the way, the anniversary is going to be on the 17th, 18th of May this year. Okay, so very significant. That's when Israel was reborn as a nation. Because why? It had been ruled over by the Islamic Empire from when Islam conquered in around 639, 640 AD. Okay, once they had conquered, it was the founder of Islam. I'm going to be respectful where I can, right? The founder of Islam, I won't say his name, okay? Be respectful. But the founder of Islam, I'm going to state things how they are, but I'll still try to be respectful. He passed away, and he didn't get to rule his empire as everybody and himself had likely hoped. So once he had passed away, his, I don't know what the proper term is, his cohorts, his amigos, his associates, the ones who are, doing things with him, they became the first rulers known as caliphs. So they didn't call themselves kings or pharaohs or other titles of rulerships. They came up with their own called caliphs. Okay, now after the founder passed away, he was technically the first ruler. He's the one who started the whole religion and that empire. The following caliphs after him, okay, they numbered 10, and the 10th caliph was the one who built the Dome of the Rock on the Temple Mount. Okay, now, the 10th caliph, after the first ruler, who was the founder and the creator of the religion and the empire. So the 10th caliph was the 11th ruler. Now, if we look in the book of Revelation and in the book of Daniel, we're warned that this final beast kingdom would have 10 kings. Why are we told about 10 kings? Why is it so important? We're told about that. We're told about that, in Daniel and in Revelation. Now, in Daniel, it adds an extra perspective. In chapter 7, it details that there are 10 kings, and then after them rises an 11th. It is that 11th king who builds the abomination. Okay? And it is that 11th king, when the abomination is built, that marks the measure. It says in Daniel 7, verse, I think, 24 or 25, it says, and unto his hand is given the measure of 3.5 times. So it is from that measure of the 11th king who would build the abomination, which is to be built upon the Temple Mount. And at that point is where you take the measure of 3.5 times, which is 1260 years. Okay? And that 11th ruler of Islam was the 10th caliph who built the Dome of the Rock on the Temple Mount in 688 AD. So, like I said, this is further concreting in the undeniable evidence here. Okay? So, when Daniel, whoever wrote the book of Daniel, this prophecy, whether it was Daniel or someone after him, okay, it's irrelevant because whoever wrote it lived between 500 and something and 100 something BC. Okay, whilst they may have known when the continual sacrifice was taken away in 602 BC, they didn't know anything about the future. Okay, and that's just the starting step of this branch of the Daniel prophecy. Okay, they would have had to predict, they would have needed to predict every single thing in this prophecy after that first event, which is the only one they may have known about, which they would have known about. Okay, so consider that as well, right? That adds to the legitimacy of all this. But nonetheless, right? So 1290 years from when Nebuchadnezzar ransacked the temple, took away the continual sacrifice. 1290 years later, like God tells Daniel, you'd have the abomination built on the Temple Mount. This is 688 AD. We're told in Daniel chapter 7 that it would be the 11th king, okay, who comes up after the first 10, who builds this abomination, and unto his hand is given a measure of 3.5 times for his nation, the final beast kingdom, to rule and trample over Israel. Okay, so from 688 AD until 1948, Islam did rule over as an empire over Israel. In 1948, at the end of the Arab War, Israel was reborn as a nation. At this point, the Jews and the Christians, the people of Israel, the people of God, got to return there. It was the mark of the ingathering. This is very important. Israel being reborn and the start of the ingathering back to Israel. Okay, now in Daniel chapter 12, it says Daniel is asking God, and God is explaining to him these periods of time, right? The 1260 years, which is the 3.5 times. He says the period of 3.5 times, which is 1260 years, is taken from after the completion of the scattering of the holy ones. Okay, now, over time, people have wrongly assumed this to be the ransacking of Israel by Rome. Okay, Rome was not the final beast kingdom. Rome was just part of the Greco-Roman beast kingdom. Now, it was the latter end of Grecia, basically. Now, after Rome ransacked Israel, Rome itself fell as an empire not that long afterwards, a couple hundred years afterwards. But besides that, many other nations took over and trampled over Israel for hundreds of years, 500 to 600 years. Okay, it didn't all come to an end with Rome. There was lots of activity afterwards, and the Bible forewarned us in the Old and New Testament, the nations that trample Israel. Okay, now, the founder of Islam was born in around 550 or so BC. Okay, and I'm not certain offhand how old he was. I think maybe in his 40s or 50s when he had his experiences, visions, and begat the new religion and started his empire. Okay, before his untimely passing. Okay, and his empire of Islam is what conquered Israel not that long after in 639, 640 AD. Okay, he may have been born 580 or something like that, right? But that's the time frame. Israel was conquered by their empire in 639, 640 AD. Okay, now in Daniel chapter 12, we're then told that there's going to be an additional 75 years after the 1260, because we're told that the overall measure up until the very end is 1335. So if you're looking at this with common sense, you have a measured line. He's told you where the end is, and he says that it's 1335. It's the 1335th. So you know that counting forward from that point, 1335 is where you're getting the start of the measure. He said the start of that measure is from the completion of the scattering. Okay, so the people of Israel had been going into exile, fleeing Israel and so forth since its destruction by Rome in 70 AD. But like I said, for hundreds of years, for 600 years, the people of God remained in Israel and continued to each their own, either remaining in or fleeing from Israel. Okay. However, when Islam conquered in 640 AD, their reputation was so formidable and they were so feared that when they made their way to Israel, Israel actually bent down, so to speak, and said, "Here, take it." They didn't want to fight because they knew the reputation that Islam had. Okay, so they submitted. Okay, and from that point, okay, when the Dome of the Rock was built shortly thereafter in 688, fitting with all Daniel's prophecies, that with the 11th ruler of that final beast kingdom, okay, that's where you take the measure from. Okay, so from 1948, you have another 75 years. That takes you to the 1335th year. Okay, the completion of the scattering was 688 AD. At this point here is referred to by Jesus. Jesus in the New Testament quoted the quoted the prophecy of Daniel. Excuse me, quoted the prophecy of Daniel. Okay, and he said, when you see the abomination standing in the holy place is the name, biblical name for the Temple Mount. When you see the abomination standing in the holy place, where it ought not, then you should flee to the mountains. This was Jesus, the Messiah, giving the instruction to do the final scattering. And this is, in that way, it's showing you and helping to confirm that 688 was the completion of the scattering. Yes, they had conquered in 640, but once that Dome of the Rock was built, and there's even historical documents, contemporary to the time, where people living at the time, like famous writers, when they saw that thing being built on the Temple Mount, they said, surely this is the thing that the prophet Daniel spoke about. Okay, nothing like it had been done before. The statue of Zeus that was put in there is far surpassed by an entire new structure to a new deity being built upon it. Furthermore, in Daniel's chapters like 8, 9, 10, and 11, he details about the birth and the rise and the foundation of the final beast kingdom. Most people have overlooked that. It's explicitly detailed. He details who the king, the ruler of Grecia was, and then he talks about everything from when that first ruler, who was Alexander, died, and then his kingdom went to 4 divisions. It goes on for a couple chapters there. It's talking about all that time from between then and the rise of the final beast kingdom. When the final beast kingdom arose with their founder, the whole origin story of it is right there in Daniel's chapters. Okay? Perfectly mapped out, perfectly aligns with absolutely everything that transpired. And it leads right into chapter 7. Well, chapter 7 is just before this, right? But it leads right into chapter 12. So chapter 12 is where it talks about these numbers that I'm talking about now. Okay, so it just described the creation of the final beast kingdom, its rise to power in the prior chapters. And then in chapter 12, which is the final chapter of Daniel, is where God gives Daniel the numbers. Daniel has been so perplexed by seeing all this spectacle of this final beast kingdom rising up after Grecia and Rome, and he's wondering, what is all this terrible stuff that he's seeing take place, and when is it going to happen? And God tells him, at the completion of the scattering of the holy ones. That's why Jesus said, when you see the abomination standing in the holy place where it ought not, flee to the hills. That's the completion of the scattering. So when the abomination, which was the Dome of the Rock, was built on the Temple Mount, that was 688 AD, confirming history, confirming the Bible, confirming the prophecy. This is undeniable evidence. Okay, so 1948 is the end of the 1260 years. There's another 75 that takes it up to the end, as God calls it, which is the 1335th. And in chapter 12, God gives us clear instruction to know and to count when this end will come. He said, blessed is he who waiteth earnestly, okay, and does come to the years 1335. He calls it the end twice and says, you go on to your lot at the end of days. Okay, that is the end of days. All right, as Daniel described elsewhere in chapter 7 with the arrival of Messiah. Okay, at the end of days and the judgment. Okay, that is the end of days, the 1335th, which corresponds with 2023, 2024. And why, like on the title of my book, you see both years, why have I never pinned it to one specific year or one, especially not a specific season, month, week, or day, is because nobody knows the specific event or day, week, hour, blah, 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 which God has started the measure from. We know the general year, the general period, but I also want to point out this is something that I call year flux. It's logical. Bear with me. If the event took place in a January, or if it took place in a December of the same calendar year, those events still took place in the same calendar year, so it's the same number for the year, but the events themselves are 12 months apart. Okay? So if God's taking the measure from January of that specific year or from the December of that specific year, that makes a big difference. That's why you can't just say, oh, the end is definitely coming specifically in 2023. That's why I've always said, because of that logical year flux, you have to allow for that flux of up to a year, up to 12 months to allow for that discrepancy, because we don't know exactly, the specific day and all that when it was being taken from. And in this, what is said in the New Testament in those 2 or 3 places, that no man will know the day or the hour, that holds true, because nobody knows the day or the hour or the week or the month or the season which God is taking this measure from. Okay? Even though Israel was reborn 18th of May, 1948, man, I don't think it's going to happen in May 18th. You know what I mean? It could happen at any point during the year. 2024 is going to be the year. Okay? It's quite simple. Now, that's the prophecy of Daniel. Now, let's look at this outside the box. What I just described. We had a prophecy of 1,209 years. Okay? That came to pass. That came true. It culminated with the creation of an abomination on the Temple Mount. That came true. That's something separate. That's a separate article, a separate thing that the prophet would have had to predict that will come to pass at the exact precise point. So the abomination, the Dome of the Rock, was built upon it. Now, the prophet, same prophet Daniel, in chapter 10 or 11, where he's talking about the creation of this final beast kingdom, he says that its founder will create a religion, okay, and erect temples to a new God that nobody, not even his forefathers, have heard of before. This is true with that religion. He created it. It didn't exist before. You can't say that about Rome. Rome followed the same gods for thousands of years. Same with Greece. Okay, plus Greece and Rome worship the same gods anyways, right? But with Islam, it was a brand new religion. He had a vision one day in a cave. His vision, he was taken up to the heavens, according to his story, and he came back and created the religion. Okay, created the empire to disseminate the religion and reinforce it across the planet. Okay, this is what occurred. It's a brand new religion, brand new deity that nobody had heard of before, not even his own tribe, family, or forefathers. Okay, he had to introduce it. And he had a very difficult time, if you look at history, introducing it to people because people didn't want to accept something brand new. Okay, because along with his religion was saying that the Jews and the Christians perverted the text and that it needs to be rewritten, which is why they rewrote the Bible as the Quran. Okay, I own a Quran, by the way, so I fact-checked a lot of things and blah, blah, blah. I'm not here to talk about that, though. Okay, I'm just pointing that out. Now, I'm not just making stuff up, okay? That's why they rewrote it. Now, the prophet Daniel warns all of this. He says that the founder of the final beast kingdom will create a new religion, a new empire, and build temples to a new and unknown God that not even his own forefathers knew about. Okay, number one. Okay, the next thing is that he will change the laws. Now, all tyrannical empires do such thing, but he literally did. They literally did. They rewrote the Jewish law. They rewrote the Bible, which is called the Torah and the law. You know what I mean? So they literally fulfilled that. Okay? Greece and Rome never rewrote the Bible. Okay? And enforced it brutally as well, to each their own. Okay? In certain cases. All right? Rome and Greece never did that. The only one that ever did such a thing was the final beast kingdom, which was Islam. Okay, which is why in the book of Revelation it's described as, remember, Daniel says, where the angel defines to Daniel that the beasts are kingdoms. Okay, so in Revelation, we're talking about the final beast kingdom as this dragon with 7 heads. Okay, and he says there's also a lamb-like beast. Well, that lamb-like beast is the founder, okay, who is lamb-like. It's the only other religion on the planet which includes Jesus. Nobody ever thinks about that. That makes it lamb-like, more lamb-like than any other religion. It also claims to be biblical and the only true religion through Jesus. Okay? So figure that one out. That's the lamb-like beast. He did miracles, false miracles, that convinced his followers of his authenticity. Okay? So, and he's the one who begat the new religion and the new empire. But because he didn't get to create it during his lifetime, and it was, built upon after his passing, that's why it was portrayed as lamb-like beast who is edifying and making everybody worship the the kingdom itself, which would rise. Okay, and that kingdom would have those 10 kings, which Daniel aforementioned, right? So everything's detailed there. Now, all of that came to pass, like Daniel warned. Okay, so there's too many different articles of the prophecy here that all came true. This is impossible for anybody to just make up. So this is bona fide prophecy, all coming true, down to minute little details. It even talks about how this founder will go off when they're starting, founding their empire, moving out and capturing different lands, how they would come to the Holy Land. They would set up their tents there and build palaces there. They would enrich their temples with jewels and everything to this unknown God and all of that, a God of fortresses, it's called, right? So all of that came to pass. And that's in chapter 11. At the end of chapter 11, where it is just finished describing the rise of the final beast kingdom, okay, it then goes into chapter 12. The start of chapter 12, which is the final chapter, is where Daniel has just been exhausted after receiving all of those visions of all that terrible stuff happening. And then he asks God, that's when he starts asking, till when is the end of these wonders, and so forth. And that's when God tells him, oh, well, you want time periods in this? Well, here you go. From the completion of the scattering, which is like verse 6 or 7, is 3.5 times, 1,260 years. Okay? And there we go. So Daniel was shown what would transpire and what next beast kingdom would take over Israel. Okay, now the very fact that Rome came in and overthrew Israel, and then after Rome, we had many different empires that came in and took over the land temporarily over that 600-year period until Islam did. People bicker and argue about which kingdom was the beast kingdom. Oh, was this? Well, there's an argument here. Even Rome had the biggest empire of all the prior beast kingdoms, but Rome wasn't even a beast kingdom, right? Its kingdom was bigger. Its empire, was bigger than Grecia. Grecia is the one that's named as a beast kingdom prior to the final. Okay, so like I said, if you read Daniel's chapters where he talks about the fall of the Grecian beast kingdom, it talks about its rise with King Alexander. He says it's the first king, that's King Alexander. This is well accepted by all biblical historians and everybody, is King Alexander he's talked about. When King Alexander died, his empire broke up into 4 divisions. Okay, now historically, this was taking place just, in first 100 years or 200 years BC or so. Okay, Rome overthrew the temple in 70 AD, but Rome as an empire fell a couple hundred years AD. Okay, so in that short time frame, we had Rome showing up when? At the end of the Grecian Empire. So if you read those chapters of Daniel where he talks about the Grecian Empire falling, and then he goes on for a whole chapter about all this seemingly boring stuff going back and forth, that's what happened with Rome at the end of the Grecian Empire. At the end of the Grecian Empire, Rome stepped in, but they were never a beast kingdom. Okay, what makes a beast kingdom a beast kingdom? People always invent ideas, but they don't stop to think the logical things. All of the named biblical beast kingdoms that Daniel names, like Babylon, Medes and Persia, and Grecia, they had to rule over Israel itself. Okay, they had to rule over Israel itself. That's the key thing. They couldn't just be big bad nations on the planet. They had to rule over Israel, dominate it. Israel had to be its empire. Like, they had to own Israel, like own it on paper at the time, right? It was part of their land, right? Their empire. That's what makes a beast kingdom in relation to Israel. They have to actually occupy and own the actual land at the time. Okay, now with Rome, this wasn't the case. Rome introduced all this fancy paperwork and legal terms for everything. But at the end of the day, if we look at the simple observable facts and not looking at fussy details, Rome allowed different religions to practice their own beliefs as long as they did not, harm others and blah, 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 infringe on certain pretty sensible things, right? So that's why they allowed most religions to practice, even Christianity at the start, until Nero and accusations broke out. Okay, because they accused the Christians of doing terrible acts of vandalism, right? Now, with Judaism, they were not only allowed to practice Judaism, but members of Judaism became affluent, if I'm not mistaken, and even held political positions of power. You had the Herod's family, who ruled over the land of Israel as tetrarchs or whatever they were at the time. Okay, now Rome built the Jews their temple of the time. I mean, for heaven's sake, right? You know what I mean? That's like the complete opposite of what a beast kingdom does. A beast kingdom comes in and in a sense, erases the religion and the people from the land and takes over ownership of everything. Rome may on paper have owned Israel in whatever bizarre legal sense, but they allowed the people to remain there and to be ruled by at least somewhat members of Judaism. The Herods were partly Jewish or fully Jewish, one of the two, right? You know what I mean? And they built them the second temple. I mean, you can't compare that to Islam that came in, dominated for 1,260 years, and then wiped out and built new monuments to new God, especially on the Temple Mount. I mean, subjugated the people, forced them to convert to each their own. People were beheaded, people were enslaved, people were exiled to each their own. Okay, it's just, you cannot compare it to Rome. It's a complete opposite. It's like opposite end of the spectrum to what Rome did. Rome's like, hey, you want to practice Judaism and Christianity? Okay, until problems arose. We'll build you a temple. Islam, oh, you got a temple there? Let's go build a new temple to a new god on top. You can't even compare the two. Yeah, a Roman ruler put a statue of Zeus in the temple and made some bad sacrifices of pigs happen. That pales in comparison to that took place in the Jewish temple. In the Jewish temple, which under Islam no longer stood and was replaced with an Islamic temple to a new god. You can't compare the two scenarios. Which one's worse? In the Empire of Islam, it was like 10 times as large as Rome. Okay, so in all ways, Islam was the bigger empire, and they occupied and ruled and owned Israel in that sense during that time period. It was at the end of the 1260 years in 1948 that historically and biblically, according to the prophecy, that period of rulership ended, and by God's grace was given back. And that's when, in 1948, Israel was reborn and the people of God got to return. And this is even more striking, as I noted, in Daniel chapter 12, because in Daniel chapter 12, we're told that the start of that time is marked by the completion of the scattering. That's the Dome of the Rock in 688. The end of that time period, in the same breath, even though it's not specified, logically in the same breath, the end of that time period would be the inverse. So the start of the time period, everybody flees. At the end of the time period, everybody comes back. That's what we can observe from history. Everybody fled in 688. Those who remained became subjugated as part of the Islamic Empire. At the end of that time period, the empire's rule ended and the people influxed back in, the complete inverse opposite. So this is like a perfect fulfillment in history of the prophecy of Daniel and what would occur. This should reassure us that we have those final 75 years, and hence 2024 must be the final year. Okay, quite simply. Now also, there's many other things that I've detailed in the book. I'll go through them very quickly here. I don't have time to read through all the chapters, but getting into so those are the prophecies of Daniel. Very few people in the world, besides me, a few other people in the world, there's not many, are even aware of those revelations. Okay, and because it's so popular in Christianity today to believe that Rome is the final beast kingdom, this is what's led everybody astray. Okay, but Daniel says in three places that the final beast kingdom is unlike and it's different from all the prior beast kingdoms that came before it. It's not like any of them. Okay, that is true of Islam. Rome was a carbon copy of Greece. It's the same looking people from the same continent on the planet. They had the same architecture. They had the same blinking religion, for heaven's sake. You can't get much more photocopied between Rome and Grecia. You don't get that comparison with anybody else on the planet like that. Rome and Grecia were the same blinking religion. You cannot deny that. They just had their own name for the same one gods. Jupiter was Zeus. Mercury was Hermes. Okay, and blah, blah, blah. Everybody knows that, right? Daniel said the final beast kingdom will be unlike that one. Also, Jesus said in Revelation that the final beast kingdom and its kings don't yet have their kingdom. This is when Jesus was speaking to John after the death of Jesus. So, the revelation was pretty much accepted to have been given to John in like 70 to 90 AD. In either case, in the first century AD, Jesus, who lived during the time of Rome, and Jesus, who died at the hands of Rome, is telling John that clearly Rome's not the final beast kingdom because the final beast kingdom doesn't have a kingdom yet. Rome had a kingdom at that time. So it's not Rome, right? There's many reasons why it's not Rome. Okay, Rome was just like Greece, and for that reason. Okay, and also you'll just be cherry picking for 10 million years over, who are the 10 Roman kings, and blah, and blah, and blah, right? So it's not Rome, it's Islam. So few people have seen that. That's why so few people in the world have clued into 2023 and 2024 from a valid biblical perspective. You got people out there who every single calendar year that comes up invent reasons why the end of days and rapture is going to be in that current year. I am not one of those. You can go fact check it. You could ask all my long-term subscribers. I've been on YouTube in 2016. I was the first person on YouTube using the prophecy of Daniel to testify about 2023, 2024 end of days. And I wholeheartedly testified it for the last 7 years on YouTube. Maybe it's over 7 years now. Okay. I did it on my first channel, which I got rid of years later. And all my subsequent channels, I've been doing that. Up until now, I've been testifying that. Okay. But very few people in the world have clued in to this reality, and it's very, very sad, and it's very, very scary because everybody's so fixated in their ways and what they want to think, and it's Rome, and getting this satanic distraction, because that's who it's coming from, to lead you away from the blatant truth that's right in front of your eyes. I mean, for heaven's sake, Islam ruled over Israel for 1260 years, subjugated the people. They created a currency with the mark of 666 on it, the Bismillah. The Bismillah they wear as a symbol on their forehead and on their right arm in Islam. Go look it up. It's a fact. Bismillah, 99% identical match to what John wrote in the Greek with his own hand in the original text. Okay, the 3 different Greek symbols for 600 and 60 and 6, because he didn't write 3 6s. Anybody telling you it's 3 6s, they don't even know what they're talking about. He wrote a 600 symbol, a 60 symbol, and a 6 symbol. Okay, Alpha Chi Sigma or something like that. And that is a 99% perfect match for the Bismillah written in Islam. And John was told by Jesus that the final beast kingdom, they would wear this on their forehead, on the right arm. And in Islam, they created the Bismillah, which is your creed, where you swear your soul's allegiance to Allah, which is their God. Okay, and you put it upon your forehead or your right arm. You can go look it up. Go look at the photos. It's dead real. Okay, so in every aspect, it's a fulfillment. When that 11th ruler built the Dome of the Rock and the Temple Mount, they created a currency with the Bismillah marked on it, and it became the mandated currency, and you couldn't buy or sell without it. So all those biblical prophecies warning that this would happen already took place. Okay, they already had a beast kingdom. They already ruled for the longest period of time that any beast kingdom could. You could add up the reigns of all the prior beast kingdoms, and it still wouldn't come near what Islam ruled over for. Islam ruled for 1,260 years. Okay, Babylon, the Medes and Persians, and the Grecians only ruled for a couple hundred years altogether. Okay, Islam ruled for like 2 or 3 or 4 times the length. The size of their empire was like 10 times the size of all their empires. You can't even compare it. The Islamic Empire still rules parts of its empire to this very day. Portions of Africa, the Middle East is still part of their empire. Okay, you can't say the same about Rome. Rome is gone. Now you can go visit Rome on an airplane. You know what I mean? They don't rule parts of the world anymore. Okay, but it's people have just been oblivious and ignoring what is still over there right now with Temple Mount, ignoring all of that, ignoring the fact that in Revelation it says that for the 3.5 times the nations will fight over Israel. This is what has been taking place during those 1,260 years that Islam ruled it. They wanted to rule it. Other people tried to come in, like the Crusaders. There are many bloody battles and all of this. But when 1948 came and Israel was reborn, that's when you start getting into this current conflict, because it was split. And I'm not getting into all that politics stuff, okay? But that's where we get to the rebirth of Israel in the influx, okay? The end of their dominion and their empire over Israel. To me, it doesn't get more significant than that. But in my book here, I also detail how, for example, in chapter 1, this is one of my unique discoveries. From the birth of Seth until 2023, 2024 is exactly 6,000 years. I have it all mapped out with all the verses. Just getting to the chapter. All the verses are there for you. Okay, all the math is done in steps on each page in progressive steps. It's not just one calculation. There are sub steps leading up to the end to make it better for everybody. And listing off all the kings, their lengths of reign is all there for everybody. So I put all the hard work for you on the paper for you, right? And you're adding up everything, and then at the end you get 6,000 years. So all the evidence is right there. All the verses right there on the page. There's no denying it. It's 100% factual. The 6,000 years from the first born mortal son of man, who was Seth. Okay, Adam wasn't born. Okay, he wasn't created as a mortal. He was cursed with mortality. His first children, Abel and Cain. Well, Cain didn't get to create the lineage from him. Okay, Abel was killed. The lineage is counted as coming from Seth, who was the firstborn mortal, from whom the lineage comes. From Seth's birth until now is 6,000 years. God created the world in 6 days, and the seventh day he rests. Mankind will toil in the ground and work for 6,000 years, and on the seventh millennia, there is rest. Okay, so at the end of 6,000 years is when God and Messiah come to the earth, do the judgment, and then the world will rest for 1,000 years. So 2023, 2024 is the 6,000th year. You don't believe me? It's all on the pages here. Okay? Nobody else has discovered that. That is my exclusive, unique discovery. I got it. It's copywritten, international copyright in the book. Nobody else has done this before. That is it. I'm telling you, 6,000 years. There's no denying it. There's not even wiggle room of 1 year. It's all there documented. Bam, 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 bam. Everything, one after the other. Right up to the end, 6,000 years. Now you tell me, is it a coincidence that when you add up all the time, it's 6,000 years exactly to this year, which is the year that Daniel's prophecy said would be the end? Is that a coincidence? You tell me. No, it's not. Right? Next, another discovery of my own in the second chapter from the book of First Enoch, the great prophecy of 4,900 years in the book of Enoch. This confirms 1948, and I detail this. Okay, so in the index here, I show which each of these prophecies confirm. All of these 7 prophecies either confirm 1948 or 2023, 2024. Okay, so the 6,000 year prophecy, the 6,000 years evidence shows 2023, 2024. The prophecy from Enoch, the 4,900 years, as they detail in the chapter, it's an astounding discovery, ends in 1948 with the rebirth of Israel. Okay, it also, that was the end of the World War as well, right? And what happened in the World War to the Jewish people, right? So there you go. Then another unique discovery that I made, this one's very complex. I'm not even going to try to get into it here. But the essence of the third chapter here from the prophecy of Isaiah, it confirms 2023, 2024. This is talking about a period of double punishment where God would punish Israel double for her sins. And it's all in the paper with the maths and everything. When you add up all the years after Solomon, so taking David and Solomon as the 2 righteous kings, after them, adding up all the years until the death of Jesus is 999. I didn't even round it up. It's 999. Double that precisely is 1,998. Okay, and if you look at from the death of Jesus, which is 26 AD, which is confirmed from Daniel chapter 9, the decree of Artaxerxes in 457 plus 483 years gives 26 AD. Okay, so from 26 AD, that's the end of 999 years of sin where Israel was disappointing God. It culminated with the death of the Messiah. How much more poignant can you get for the end of the time period of disappointment? At that point there is where God says, I'm going to give you the double period of punishments. They sinned for 999 years. They would then be punished with exile for 1,998 years. Okay, so after Jesus was killed, they got 40 years of signs in the temple, which is another topic for another day, 40 miraculous signs. The temple doors would open and shut by themselves. The continual flame kept going out. They couldn't relight it. It would never stay lit. And the scarlet wool and the scapegoat would never turn white. It would stay red, like God wouldn't accept forgiveness for their sins. So all of that took place after Jesus died. Then the temple fell down, and the start of the exile and all of that punishment started. So it all came true. So after 26 AD, 1998 years, what does that bring you to? 2023, 2024. Okay? Is that a coincidence? God says, I'm going to give you this double period of punishment. Starts at the death of the Messiah. That confirms 2024 as well. Is that a coincidence? You tell me. Another discovery I made, which is chapter 4 from another prophecy in Daniel talking about Nebuchadnezzar. This one is very complex. It goes deep. But again, it can't be a coincidence. But the period of 2,520 years, and this one's astounding too because it cross-links with one of the prophecies and with the maths. It's quite amazing. But 2,520 years confirms 1948. This is where Israel, in poetic symbolism, is being compared. God is comparing her to, I think it was Babylon or Tyre. That's the reason why. But nonetheless, let me get into the prophecies of Daniel that I covered in this video, which is chapters 5 and 6. And then in chapter 7, a lesser but still discovery that I made nobody else seems to talk about it, but it's important. This is from Revelation, the 7th pillar. 1,260 years is confirmed in Revelation 12. Okay, and in Revelation 12, it says that after Jesus dies and ascends, which happened after 26 AD, that Satan was wroth with Israel, and that God took Israel, which represents the people and all that, and took her away into the wilderness to hide her. There's like, it was either 4 or 5 specific descriptive terms that God has used in chapter 12, okay, at the start of chapter 12 and towards the end of chapter 12, because the same story is told twice. And God identifies this with the 4 or 5 unique descriptive words, like flew to the wilderness, nourished for a time, times and a half. And the other one says nourished for 1260 days, which are day years. That's where God is showing you in chapter 12 the mathematical basis for a time being 360 years, because he's talking about the same one event, which is taking place after Jesus dies and ascends. Okay, when Israel, the people of Israel, Jews, Christians, whatnot, the people of God, where they're taken out throughout the world. So it's talking about their period of time when Israel will be ruled by another. They're taken out of Israel and they go out into the world. So during that period of 1260 years, 3.5 times, that's when Islam was ruling over Israel as where Islam was ruling over Israel as the empire. That 1260-year period. Okay, and the people of God were taken out of there. That's why the completion of the scattering that I mentioned earlier makes that it becomes even more relevant, right? Highly, highly significant here. Okay, and it was during that period, at the completion of the scattering, everybody was taken out, dispersed throughout the world, and the rest of the believers were created in the world, like new believers elsewhere in the world, whilst Israel itself was being dominated by the final beast kingdom. Okay, so, and by the way, it was warned that the final beast kingdom would do beheadings and forced conversions and all of that, and all of that took place with Islam, historically confirmed. So chapter 12 is where it confirms mathematically, like I said, that the same time period that's being spoken about, flew to the wilderness, this, that, they're all the same descriptive terms. God says it's 1260 years in one place, and in the other place he says it's 3.5 times. So he's showing you the formula. 3.5 times equals 1260 years. Okay, and someone will say, well, how do you know it's not 3.5 years, 1260 days? Oh, I'm just wrong. Well, this is how you know, because you tell me, did Israel go into exile for 3.5 years at any point in history? No. They've been in exile for, nearly 2,000 years. So don't even give me that baloney. And people are always quick to say, like, oh, well, it could be 3.5, should be 3.5 because it says that. Israel never went into exile for 3.5 years. Give me a blinking break. You know what I mean? You think God's going to number off 1,260 days and be literal about it when you look back in history, and that clearly didn't happen, but the 1,260 years clearly fits. And Ezekiel 4 is where God says they use this day for a year principle. He repeats it like 2 or 3 times. He says day for a year, day for a year. That's what he uses. He gives Ezekiel a prophecy and says, lay on your side for 380 days. And he says it's going to be a day for a year. This is how God does things. And every single time God gives a numbered prophecy to people in the Bible, such as with Jeremiah, it's the units of time are coded. Okay? They're not to be taken literally. Further proof for this, in the book of Daniel itself, Daniel, the prophet, is said to be pondering on the prophecy of Jeremiah 70 weeks. And the angel of God comes to Daniel and say, hey, Daniel, guess what? It's not actually weeks. It's weeks of years. Okay? So we know that God doesn't use literal time units. And we know, looking at common blinking sense in history, Israel didn't go into exile for 3.5 years at any point back then, ever. Okay? He's been in exile for nearly 2,000 years. So it's definitely years. We got Ezekiel 4. So there you go. Common sense shows you it's years, not days. Okay? And by that reasoning, one time is 360 years. Okay? So that chapter 12 is obviously put in there by God to validate the maths. When you look at it from a mathematical perspective, he's giving you the same time period, the 2 different units of time for a reason. It's like a simple algebraic formula where you can figure out what x is. X is how big is a unit of time. Okay, and the time is 360 years. And what do you know? 360. It's a pretty nice round mathematical number, right? So there's more than enough evidence that these things will happen. And also in the book I cover, I think it's in the prophecy of Isaiah, when Jesus was in the Garden of Gethsemane, okay, he went to go say a mega prayer to God in the wilderness. It was about him handing over the cup to God. Now, this is very important. This is so important, but I best explain it and document it in the book. I could only misrepresent it if I try to do it now. But in simple form, that cup, what is that cup? People argue, oh, I think the cup is this, I think the cup is that. You go look at the prophecy of Isaiah, which talks about the double portion of punishment. And I show in here that Isaiah verse where it's talking about a cup of wrath, okay? And they will be given a double cup of wrath. And then I show you the Revelation verse where it's describing the harlot, which is identified in Revelation as Israel and Jerusalem. It says so in Revelation. It says the city where our Lord was crucified. It says so, and that is Jerusalem, Israel, okay? And it says, give unto the harlot mingle double in her cup, the cup of wrath, okay? So that is the double period of punishment after the death of the Messiah. Messiah came to make things right. He was put to death. Okay, boom, we mark the double period of punishment. That's why Jesus, before he went to die, said that prayer. I'm going to give this cup, the cup of the wrath, unto you, God. Do with it what you will. Okay? And he told his disciples, wait here and watch while I go off and pray. When he came back, they were asleep. They weren't waiting and watching for his return. Okay? So he rebuked them to send them a message. Be waiting and watching. Know when I will return. How do you know when to return? Daniel chapter 12. The blessed is he who waits earnestly and cometh to the day 1335, which is 2024, obviously. Okay? So Jesus was teaching him a lesson there. So he went off, came back, rebuked him. He says, don't fall asleep like that again. I'm going to go off and say a prayer a second time. So he goes off, said the same prayer a second time, came back. They had fallen asleep again. He rebuked him a second time. It says, you still couldn't wait for my return. And then it says, I'm going to go do it a third time. He went off and did it a third time. Okay? What is this showing you? That 2 times they failed. Okay? Now, I better explain it in the chapter here, but in the prophecy of Hosea, it says after 2 days we will be revived on the third day. Even in Judaism and in Christianity, this is accepted that after 2,000 years, at the dawn of the 3,000th year, we will be the resurrection, will be the judgment day, the healing, the redemption, all that stuff will be taking place at the dawn of the third in relation to that. So 2,000 years and then that. We have Messiah. Jesus died in 26 AD. Well, we know that Jesus taught for 3 years, it says. So he was baptized in 23 AD. Okay, so when he was anointed as the Messiah at his baptism, became the Messiah, and then when started to do his teachings and all his holy work, that was 23 AD. Okay, 2 days later, 2020, when 2023, 2024 ends, okay, or whatever point in 2024, that's the 2 days, 2,000 years, done. On the third day, we will be healed. Okay, and that coincides with, like I said, the 1,998 days from the death of the Messiah, plus 1,998 days, the period of double punishment, takes up to 2024. You telling me that all this is a coincidence, that all these things are going to line up together and point to 2024? That's ridiculous. You know what I mean? With the prophecy of Nebuchadnezzar, where is it in here? I mean, it's astounding stuff. I mean, I kind of want to read it, but where is it? That's page 42. Let's see. It's a little bit too much to get into here, but anyways, 2,520 years is a period of 7 times. Now that's significant because God has punished him for a period of 7 times. And wait till you see that in the book there, right? That's the one where it cross links over. Now also in the book, what I mean by cross links over is you're taking a measure of 7 times from one point, which I think was the fall of Tyre, which is like 472 or something like that. It's all in the book. You take the measure of 7 times and it comes to a point. It's right on the point of Daniel's prophecy, so it links up. And you're taking with Daniel's prophecy, they come to the same resultant point, even though they're taken from different starting years. There's a difference of 30 years. So with the Nebuchadnezzar one, you're starting with 2,520, which is 7 times, but it culminates at, I think it's, where is it, 1948? Let's see. Yeah, it culminates 1948. Now with the prophecy of Daniel, he had 1,290 years, and then 1,260 years, like I already explained, and that culminates in 1948. So the 2 separate prophecies, one's seven times, 2,520 years. The other one is 1,290 plus 1,260, so it's different by 30 years, yet they both end up at the same 1948. How is that? Well, it's because there is a tangible 30-year difference, but they're all this historical important events. So that's like a cross link over. I mean, it just shows you that all this is interconnected. And I also have a whole pile of other chapters that I threw in there, chapter 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13, with extra evidence for things as well. But in terms of the 7 pillars of scriptural proof, that's a quick run through of the 7 pillars. So there's more than enough evidence. And really, all you need is Daniel's prophecy alone. You don't need all that extra stuff, but all that extra stuff does is further confirm it. I mean, especially the Garden of Gethsemane, and connection to Revelation and everything else. I mean, it's just highly significant. The reason why in Revelation that the harlot's being punished, and it's talking about that symbolism would render her double in the cup, that's because the period of double punishment is coming to the end. What happens at the end? The judgment day, the great destruction arrives, right? So she's been holding that cup, or however, it should be portrayed, but she's been holding that cup the whole time, but the wrath is poured out at the very, very end of that time period, right? And it says where our Lord and Savior was crucified. That's Jerusalem, Israel. So I've got to get going. That's it for this video. It's long enough, but there's more than enough evidence that it's going to be in 2024. We have to wait and see when it will happen. It could be at any point in the year, but in the event that even at the end of this year something doesn't occur, or it doesn't occur, I have a chapter in here where I go on. Where is it? So in chapter 10, I have a subchapter devoted to what if nothing happens in 2023 or 2024? A few possibilities, page 103. Okay, so I would like to say those things are less plausible, and there's all this evidence is strongly showing 2024, right? But I threw that in there in case, what if nothing happens 2024? You don't want to give up hope if it's just going to happen in the first few months or whatever, 2025. You get my point? Or if it's just within a year or something like that there. You don't want to have given up all hope, you know what I mean? And then, you're just a year off. So there's a few alternate scenarios where it could be extended up to, I think, towards 2028 or 2029 type of thing. So don't give up hope. And at the end of the day, we're all mortals. We're all going to die. And when you die, you're judged. So, I mean, even if you don't live to see the judgment day, you're going to have a judgment day, whether you like it or not, because you're alive as a mortal. And when you die, you're going to get judged. So, you know what I mean? But by all common sense and wisdom, the Bible shows 2024 must be there. So take care, folks. God bless. I urge you all to go get the book. And the other thing is my systematic theology. I urge you to go get that as well. That is also important for various other obvious reasons. Systematic theology of the true Christianity. Well, that's another topic for another time.